The stars stretched across the black ocean of space, distant and cold, as if watching silently from above. Somewhere in a forgotten corner of the galaxy, a planet burned. Its cities were in ruins. Its skies were filled with smoke and fire. Buildings collapsed one after another as monstrous shapes huge. Twisted creatures tore through streets, crushing anything that moved. The night was alive with screams, with explosions, with the helpless cries of a people facing extinction. In the middle of this horror, inside a shaking command bunker deep underground, alien eyes wide with terror watched the destruction through trembling hands. They had tried everything, every weapon, every defense, every hope, but nothing could stop the nightmare falling upon them. Their enemy was unstoppable, merciless, and hungry. There was only one choice left: send a call beyond their dying sky, and pray that someone, somewhere, would answer. The alien leader, a thin creature with scaled skin and deep black eyes, leaned over the console, blood running from a cut above his brow. His voice trembled as he activated the ancient transmitter, something rarely used meant only for final emergencies. His hands shook as he spoke, his voice breaking. To any life, to any ships, please. We are under attack. Our world is falling. We beg for help. Coordinates attached, please. Anyone around him. The command room shook as another distant explosion ripped through the ground above. Soldiers ran in panic. Alarms screamed. The ceiling cracked. The message was sent. The last hope of a dying world flew into the void. The leader fell to his knees, eyes wet with hopelessness. It was done. Now all they could do was wait for an answer, if one would ever come. Far away across endless stars, the signal moved silently through space. It traveled past frozen moons, through asteroid fields, and across empty systems where no life stirred. It passed forgotten relics of old wars, derelict ships, and shattered planets. For hours, for days, the signal drifted until it reached a small blue and green world at the edge of the galaxy, a planet called Earth. The signal was picked up by deep space scanners orbiting Earth's military command center, a place hidden from public eyes, buried beneath miles of reinforced steel and rock. The computers lit up, red alarms flashing as the message was decoded. Moments later, cold human eyes studied the desperate words from the far-off planet. The man in charge, a tall, stone-faced general known only as Commander Vance, stood in the silence of the command room. The alien message replaying in the air before him, his face showed no emotion as he listened to the trembling voice begging for help. His eyes were hard, cold, as if carved from iron. Around him, uniformed officers watched silently, waiting. No one spoke. The weight of the message was heavy. It wasn't the first time Earth had received such calls. Out here in the dark, the galaxy was cruel. Many weaker worlds fell to monsters. Many called for help. Few survived. Commander Vance folded his hands behind his back. He turned slowly, his voice calm, quiet but carrying deadly weight. "Prepare the fleet," he said. The officers moved at once. Lights flared, orders were given, and deep beneath the ground, titanic machines roared to life. Massive steel doors split open. Warships, black, enormous, bristling with weapons, rose from hidden bays, their engines glowing with deadly light. Across the skies of Earth, spaceports activated, and soldiers in black combat armor, faces hidden behind visors, marched into troop carriers with precise, inhuman calm. These were not ordinary soldiers. These were Deathworlders, humans from Earth, planet known across the stars for one thing: survival through violence, and the galaxy's whispered legends. Earth was a death world, planet so dangerous, so wild, that everything that lived there had been shaped by endless struggle. Earth's gravity was higher, its predators more brutal, its environment harsher. To live on Earth was to evolve into something fierce, something terrifying. While other species spoke of peace and diplomacy, humans were spoken of in hushed fear. They were conquerors, fighters, survivors, and when they came, they brought not only weapons, but something worse: mind built for war. The human fleet was unlike anything the dying alien world had ever seen. Ships the size of mountains, stealth. Fighters like black arrows, carriers that could hold entire cities. And above them all, the flagship Titan's fist moved with unstoppable power. Its surface bristled with cannons, missile pods, and energy weapons that could tear through planets. Inside the command deck, Commander Vance stood watching the final preparations, his hands folded, his cold eyes distant. He spoke softly, almost to himself. "They called for help," he said. "We will answer." But in his voice, there was no warmth, no kindness. There was only the cold machinery of duty. The call had gone out. And now, Earth's most dangerous children were on the move. Back on the alien world, the skies burned. The remaining survivors huddled in shattered buildings, faces marked by soot and tears as the last defense lines collapsed. Families clung to each other. Soldiers without weapons fell to their knees. And in the blackness above, thunder rolled as the invaders' giant, insect-like beasts swarmed unopposed. It was over. They knew it. Then something new appeared in the sky. At first it was just a speck, then another, then hundreds. The shapes grew larger, darker, until the entire sky above the broken planet was filled with shadows. Massive black ships, their engines glowing with unnatural light, descended in perfect silence. The alien survivors looked up in terror and hope, blinking through smoke and ash. They didn't know who these new arrivals were. They didn't know what fate awaited them. A child clutched her mother's arm. "Who are they?" she whispered. The mother could only shake her head, her voice barely. A breath. I don't know. Above them, the ships moved into formation, like a vast swarm of steel creatures. The ground trembled as engines roared. The air itself seemed to freeze. And then, through speakers across the ruined capital, a voice spoke calm, clear, and inhumanly cold. "This is Commander Vance of the Earth Fleet. Assistance has arrived. Remain where you are." The words echoed through the silence. The aliens held their breath. Help had come, but they had no idea what kind of help they had summoned. And soon, they would find out. The alien skies were still burning when the first human boots touched the ground. The ships had arrived like shadows, silent and cold, their enormous metal bodies blocking out the sun. The survivors of the dying world stood frozen, as black-armored. Figures stepped down from ramp after ramp. They moved with terrifying calm, each one covered from head to toe in sleek battle armor. Their faces hidden behind blank visors that gave away nothing, no emotion, no mercy. They looked more like machines than living creatures. The Deathworlders had landed, far above the ground, inside the massive command deck of the flagship Titan's Fist. Commander Vance stood in the soft glow of holographic displays, watching every move below without blinking. His face was carved from stone, expressionless, cold. Around him, officers moved with robotic precision, reporting in soft, controlled voices. The invasion had begun. But to the humans, this was no rescue mission. This was something far older. Far colder. It was war. "Status?" Vance asked without looking away from the screens. "Ground forces are deploying, sir," an officer replied. "Initial scans confirm heavy damage to local infrastructure. Enemy biologicals still present in several regions." Vance gave a slight nod, his eyes narrowing. "Proceed as planned." "Full lockdown. No civilians outside containment zones." Number exceptions. The officer hesitated. "The locals." "They're unarmed, sir." Vance's voice remained flat. "No exceptions." The humans knew what the aliens did not. Every species in the galaxy had learned to fear Earth for a reason. Humanity came from a world of constant violence. A world where only the strongest, the smartest, the most ruthless survived. Evolution had shaped them into something no other species could fully understand. And when they took to the stars, they carried that cold fire with them. They were not here to save the aliens. They were here to win, whatever that meant. On the ground, the alien survivors began to understand. At first, they cheered when the human soldiers drove back the monstrous invaders. They watched with wide eyes as Earth's warriors unleashed weapons that lit the sky with white fire. Cannons the size of trucks blasted apart monstrous beasts that had once seemed unstoppable. The aliens wept in relief as the terrifying creatures fell under precise human fire. They thought salvation had come. But then the humans did not stop. They moved through the cities like shadows, securing every street, every building. They set up walls of steel, barricades, command posts. Without emotion, without words, they herded the survivors into small zones, surrounded by tall barriers and armed guards. Anyone who strayed outside was stopped at gunpoint. The aliens, weak and broken, watched helplessly as their planet was not only saved, but taken. One alien elder, his thin hands shaking, approached the edge of one of the human zones, confusion and fear in his ancient eyes. He looked up at the black armored soldier, standing like a statue at the checkpoint. "Why are you doing this?" he asked softly, his voice trembling. We called for help." The human's blank visor didn't move. His voice came, through the helmet like cold steel, "Orders." The elder's voice cracked. "We are not enemies." There was no reply. The elder sank to his knees as the soldier remained still, unmoving, uncaring. Around them, the sound of war still echoed in the distance, the occasional flash of weapons lighting up the smoky sky. But the monsters weren't. The only ones bringing terror now is the Deathworlders were here, and they were not leaving. Back on the Titan's fist, Vance continued watching in silence. His mind moved through calculations, possibilities, outcomes. He knew this planet was valuable, rich in minerals, strategic in location. The original enemy, the alien creatures, were only part of the problem. The locals themselves were just as much an unknown threat. Every species, every world, carried risk. That's why Earth never took chances. Control first, questions later. An aide stepped forward. "Humanitarian channels are requesting updates. The Galactic Council is monitoring our actions." Vance didn't even glance at him. His voice remained flat. "Tell them we are ensuring stability. Tell them we are saving lives." The aide hesitated, then nodded. Font's lips tightened. "And prepare Phase 2. The words were simple, but their meaning was clear. Earth's war machine was not built on mercy. It was built on survival. It was built on dominance. In one of the shattered alien cities, a young mother held her child close as human patrols passed by. The ground still shook from distant battles. But the real fear in her heart came from the black-suited figures moving through her streets. They didn't speak. They didn't show faces. They just moved like death itself, the woman whispered. Soft prayers, but deep inside, she felt a cold truth rising. The monsters who had destroyed her city were nothing compared to what had now arrived. The sky above them lit up as another wave of human dropships descended, engines roaring like thunder. More soldiers, more machines. It was growing. Some of the aliens, braver or more desperate, gathered in secret. Whispers moved through the ruins, whispers of resistance, whispers of rebellion. They spoke in hushed voices of how they had replaced one nightmare with another. They didn't know what to do, but one thing was certain: the humans were not going to leave. The Deathworlders had come, and they brought with them something. Worse than war, they brought control. In the shadows of the command room, Vance's eyes never left the screens. He watched the maps, the patrols, the expanding zones of control. His face was calm, emotionless. He had done this before. He would do it again. This was just another world, another mission, another future under Earth's cold hand and far beneath. The steel boots of the human soldiers, survivors of the burning planet, began to understand the terrible truth. The monsters were not the only threat they had called for. Help, and help had come, but not the help they had prayed for. The ground still smoked. The air still smelled of ash, blood, and broken stone.
Ow.
But now a new shadow stretched across the ruined cities, cold, massive, and unshakable. High above the burning land, Earth's war fleet hung in the sky like silent giants, unmoving but full of deadly purpose. The alien survivors looked up from their shattered homes and could hardly believe what they saw. Endless rows of black ships, their armored hulls shining with sharp, hard metal, their engines glowing. Like distant suns, they floated there, motionless, forming a perfect wall of iron above the planet. It was a sight that froze the heart. It was the arrival of the Iron Fleet. The Deathworlders had not come in peace. That much was becoming clear to everyone on the ground. The human warships didn't lower their weapons, didn't open their doors to comfort the weak or heal the wounded. They formed a blockade, a barrier so complete, so absolute, that even the stars seemed cut off. The planet had become a cage. A cage built by the most dangerous species in the galaxy. On the surface, black-armored, human soldiers moved like clockwork. Every street was scanned, every building searched, every survivor counted and contained. The once free alien people now lived behind tall metal walls, watched by soldiers whose faces they could not see. The humans gave no smiles, no warmth, only orders in the command deck of the Titan's fist. Commander Vance stood in silence, hands clasped behind his back as the final ships took position. His cold eyes traced the holographic map before him, a living image of the planet below. Red zones showed remaining alien monsters still hiding in the wilderness. Yellow zones showed human control. The green zone's steamy shrinking patches showed the last untouched land. Vance's lips barely moved as he spoke. "Lock them down," he said softly. Around him, officers nodded. Commands were sent. The Iron Fleet shifted slightly, engines rumbling like distant thunder, tightening the net. There would be no escape, no trick, no chance for this world to slip through Earth's grasp. Not now in the alien capital. Smoke still hung in the air as the survivors gathered in confusion and fear. Families held each other close. Children cried softly. No one knew what would happen next. They had called for help, but the ones who had answered brought a different kind of terror. The monstrous invaders had been savage and wild. But these new invaders, these Deathworlders, were cold. Cold in their weapons, cold in their voices, cold in their hearts. A group of alien leaders, once proud rulers of their cities, stood near the edge of the human containment zone. They watched as steel walls rose around them, cutting off what was left of their homes. One of the elders, his skin pale with fear, whispered to another, "We are prisoners." Another shook his head. "We are survivors." But even as he spoke, the truth settled over them like heavy iron. The humans were not rescuers. They were conquerors without warning. The ground rumbled again as a new wave of human ships descended from the sky. Huge armored transports, their engines glowing bright blue, slammed into the earth, their landing legs driving deep into the soil. Ramps unfolded with sharp metallic clanks, where soldiers emerged, row after row, black armor gleaming, weapons ready. The aliens watched with wide, terrified eyes. There seemed to be no end to them. The humans came in endless waves, unstoppable, unbreakable. In the center of the main landing zone, a command post was established. Tall towers, scanning drones, satellite relays all, unfolded in minutes with mechanical precision. Earth's technology was faster, sharper, more brutal than anything the alien world had ever seen. Within hours, entire sectors of the planet were under full human control. And yet, the original monsters, the twisted creatures that had destroyed so much, still lurked beyond the cities. In dark forests, in deep valleys, the alien beasts remained. The humans knew this. They tracked every movement, every life sign, but they didn't rush. They didn't panic. They prepared. And when the Deathworlders prepared for battle, no enemy survived for long. Inside one of the alien shelters, a young alien girl sat beside her wounded father. Through the cracks in the metal wall, she could see the massive human ships above, the endless soldiers below. "Oh," whispered, "they saved us, didn't they?" Her father, bleeding eyes full of fear, could not answer. He stared at the sky. He stared at the Iron Fleet, and deep in his bones, he felt something worse than fear. He felt helplessness. Elsewhere, resistance began to stir. Small groups of alien fighters, those who still had weapons, met in the dark ruins of their cities. They spoke in whispers. Some still believed they could fight back. Some still believed they could take back their world. But when they looked up at the sky and saw the black wall of ships, the hope in their hearts grew cold. How could anyone fight this? How could anyone stop an enemy that never showed emotion, never hesitated, never showed weakness? Leave them all back. Aboard the Titan's Fist, Commander Vance reviewed the next phase of the operation. He spoke without emotion, his voice steady, his words sharp as blades. Deploy recon units. Eliminate remaining biologicals. Establish permanent forward bases on all 5 continents. Planetary control in 72 hours? No one questioned him. Number 1 hesitated. The humans obeyed without doubt. The machine of war turned. When Earth's machine of war turned, nothing could stop it. On the ground, the alien people stood in their cages and watched as more human dropships descended. The sky itself seemed to burn with engine light. The distant mountains flashed with more explosions as human fighters engaged the last of the monstrous creatures in the wilds. The survivors prayed in silence, but their prayers felt empty now. Their gods had not answered, something worse had. The Deathworlders had come, and above them, the Iron Fleet stood watch, cold and silent, unmoving as steel. The wind howled across the broken wastelands, carrying smoke, dust, and the sickening scent of burned flesh. The once beautiful world lay in ruin. Entire cities were flattened, their metal bones twisted and blackened. The sky itself seemed bruised heavy, with dark clouds and the eerie glow of distant fires. But the true terror was not the silence, nor the ruins. It was what moved in the distance, the monstrous creatures that had begun the end of this world. Towering, insect-like beasts with armored hides and glowing eyes, unstoppable things that slaughtered without mercy. And now something worse had arrived to face them. The Deathworlders, without warning. The silence shattered as Earth's first strike began. From the black warships hanging motionless above, squadrons of human attack craft roared down like metallic arrows, engines screaming through the thick, smoky air. On the ground, massive armored transports rumbled forward, wheels the size of houses crushing debris beneath them. The humans were not delicate. They did not sneak or hesitate. They moved like an iron fist, cold, direct, absolute. The alien survivors, huddled in their containment zones, could only watch in numb horror. The monsters were out there, still hiding in the wildlands and forests, in the remains of shattered towns. But now, the humans marched to meet them, and something in the way they moved sent a new kind of chill through the alien bones. The Deathworlders weren't afraid. They weren't cautious. They were calm to commas if the nightmare creatures. Ahead meant nothing to them. Commander Vance stood aboard the Titan's Fist, hands folded behind his back, his cold eyes fixed on the battle unfolding below. The holographic display lit his face with flickering red and gold as explosions blossomed like deadly flowers across the map. His voice was quiet, but full of that deadly weight that chilled every officer around him. Engage all targets, full force, no retreats, no quarter. The words carried down through the command relays, through the battle groups, through the armored lines of black-armored human soldiers who now advanced through the smoking ruins. And when the Deathworlders moved, it was not like other armies. It was something far worse. The first clash came at dawn, a monstrous creature, 30 feet tall. All chitin and claws rose from the wreckage of a dead city. It let out a bone-shaking roar as it charged through the rubble. But the humans did not fall back. They didn't scream. They didn't even flinch. They stood, weapons locked, silent as shadows, and then unleashed hell. White-hot plasma beams sliced through the morning gloom. Railguns thundered. Explosive rounds ripped through armor and flesh. The monster staggered, howled, stumbled, and then fell in a smoking heap, its body torn apart with surgical precision. The ground shook as it collapsed. The human soldiers did not even slow their march. The first strike had begun. It was ruthless. Alien eyes, those who dared to peek from hiding places, watched in disbelief. The creatures they had feared for months were being slaughtered like animals. But what terrified them even more was the humans themselves. The Deathworlders moved without fear, without emotion, without hesitation. They advanced in perfect formation, their dark visors hiding any trace of humanity. They didn't celebrate victories. They didn't mourn the fallen. They simply executed the mission. Wave after wave of monstrous creatures fell. In the forests, in the ruins, in the deep valleys, everywhere the invaders hid, the humans came. And they brought with them weapons the aliens had never seen. Walking tanks that fired energy blasts that could melt steel. Drones that hovered silently and unleashed death from above. Cybernetic soldiers whose very bodies were enhanced for maximum destruction. This wasn't war. This was extermination. Hours later, a shattered village at the edge of the conflict zone. A group of alien survivors watched from behind metal fences as the black armored soldiers returned from battle. Their armor was scorched. Their weapons smoked. But their movements were calm, robotic, unshaken. No one spoke. No one wept. Even the wounded among them moved with cold purpose. The alien survivors clutched each other tighter. The monsters they had feared were being driven back. Yes, but at what price? One elder, his eyes full of sadness, whispered to no one in particular, "We are saved, but we are not free." In the command bunker, Vance surveyed the battlefield. With cold satisfaction, reports flowed in. Enemy nests destroyed, alien creatures neutralized, human casualties minimal. The map was slowly turning from red to grayish gray, zone-marking territory brought under Earth's control. He gave quiet orders to push forward, to establish permanent human settlements, to ensure complete planetary dominance. We're just one threat. The bigger goal was ownership, control, and the Deathworlders never left a task half-finished. Far to the south, a massive battle raged near the remains of a fallen spaceport. Human artillery lit the sky as more alien creatures surged forward in one last desperate charge. The monsters were enormous, hundreds of them, swarming like an unstoppable tide. For a moment, it looked as if they might break through the human lines. The air burned with fire and blood. Alien screams filled the sky, but then the Deathworlders unleashed their secret weapon. From the clouds above, a single black shape descended. Hunter-killer drone, larger than any aircraft the aliens had ever seen. Its cannons spun to life. Its missile pods opened. And in seconds, the battlefield became an inferno. Fire rained from above. Shockwaves flattened entire blocks. The alien creatures, so fearsome and wild, were blown apart by sheer overwhelming force. When the dust settled, nothing remained but ash and twisted limbs. The monsters were gone. The humans stood at the edge of the smoking battlefield. One of the few surviving alien scouts whispered in horror, his voice barely audible. They are worse than the monsters. Night fell slowly over the scarred land. Fire still burned. In the distance, the Iron Fleet remained motionless in the sky, watching, waiting. And on the ground, the Deathworlders continued their cold advance, by step, street by street, until there would be nothing left but silence. The first strike was over, and now the real conquest would begin. The wind carried the bitter scent of ashes and melted metal across the ruined cities. The monsters that had once terrorized the planet were nearly hunted down by the black-armored soldiers of Earth with brutal precision. Fires still burned. In the distance, shattered towers leaned like broken bones. The air was thick with the silence of something worse than death, something colder, something far more dangerous. The Deathworlders were everywhere. They patrolled the streets in silence, their faces hidden behind blank helmets, their weapons always raised. The alien survivors, what little remained of them, huddled inside tight. Metal containment zones watched day and night by human eyes that showed no emotion. Children no longer cried, mothers no longer whispered words of comfort. The people of the planet knew, deep in their hearts, that the monsters may have been defeated, but freedom was gone. And above them, the Iron Fleet still hung in the sky, like a wall of black steel, silent and unshakable, inside the heart of the human command post. Commander Vance stood over a glowing map of the planet. Red markers blinked where a few alien creatures still roamed in remote wilderness zones. But most of the map had turned great territory locked under Earth's complete control. Vance's sharp eyes moved slowly across the holographic images. His voice was cold as iron when he spoke. Begin resource scans. I want mineral, water, and atmospheric reports in the next cycle. One of his officers hesitated. "Sir, the locals." Vance didn't even look up. "The locals will comply, or they won't." The meaning was clear. The humans weren't here just to stop monsters. They were here to take, to claim, to own. Far below, in the shadows of a ruined city, a small group of alien leaders met in secret. They moved through broken tunnels and shattered subways, their eyes darting in fear as human patrols passed above. They spoke in hushed voices, their hands shaking, their faces pale. They knew they were being watched. They knew death could come at any moment. But they also knew something else. They couldn't just sit and wait while their planet was stolen. From them, one of the leaders, a thin, scarred elder, spoke through clenched teeth. "We asked for help. We didn't invite conquerors." Another leader, her voice barely a whisper, replied, "But we have no weapons left, no armies." Nothing. The elder's eyes burned. "Then we become something. We fight. Somehow, before it's too late." The others nodded slowly. Fear was heavy in their hearts, but so was something else. Desperation. The kind of desperation that made even the weakest creature dangerous when backed into a corner. They knew that open battle was impossible. The Deathworlders were too powerful, too fast, too merciless, but sabotage. Sabotage could still hurt them. They began to plan, as the aliens whispered in the dark. Above them, the human occupation grew stronger. Forward bases were built overnight, tall towers of steel and blinking, as lights rising from the rubble like cold monuments to Earth's control. Drones hovered over every street. Satellites watched every movement. And more soldiers arrived every day, their black ships filling the skies in endless waves. The Deathworlders weren't leaving. They were building a new world one with them. In charge, in the main Earth Command Center, Commander Vance received new reports. The mineral scans showed vast underground resources, rare metals, fuel-rich deposits, water reserves deep beneath the planet's crust. The planet wasn't just a battlefield. It was a treasure, prize, and Earth didn't let go of prizes. Vance's voice stayed calm. "Establish extraction points. Begin drilling." One young officer, clearly nervous, asked in a low voice, "And the locals, sir?" Vance finally turned his cold eyes toward the officer. The silence stretched. Then he spoke softly. "They will adapt, or they will not." The officer swallowed hard and gave a nod. But not everyone in the human ranks shared Vance's cold heart. Deep inside one of the orbiting ships, a young human pilot named Clark sat alone. Watching the surface through a wide glass viewport, she had flown over the burning cities. She had seen the faces of the alien children behind fences, the way they looked not at monsters, but at her own people with terror in their eyes. Her hands trembled slightly. She hadn't signed up for this. One of her crewmates passed behind her. "Hey, you good?" Clark forced a tight nod. "Yeah, just tired." But the doubt was there, growing, silent, unspoken. The first spark of doubt. On the ground, the alien resistance moved carefully. They gathered scrap-sold explosives, stolen human tech, anything they could use. Small acts of sabotage began. Power lines cut, drone towers knocked offline, supply lines disrupted. It wasn't much, but it was something. And in the eyes of the Deathworlders, even the smallest resistance could not be tolerated. When the first sabotage cell was discovered, the response was swift. Human soldiers raided the underground tunnels without warning. Explosions rocked the ruins as flamethrowers and plasma rifles turned hiding places into tombs. No prisoners were taken. The few captured were paraded in chains as a warning to the rest, and yet, even in the face of such overwhelming force, whispers of rebellion began to spread. Quiet, hidden, fragile, but alive. The aliens were learning something dangerous about their human conquerors. The Deathworlders were not gods. They were not unstoppable. Were cold, yes. Ruthless, yes. But underneath the armor, they were. Still flesh and blood could bleed. Far above, Commander Vance stood watching the destruction of the latest rebel cell. His face remained still, unmoved, his eyes distant. One of his aides spoke cautiously. "The resistance is growing." Vance gave a slight nod. "It always does." He turned back to the map, his voice calm as ever. "We'll burn it out." Somewhere deep in the smoke-filled ruins of the planet, someone lit a single match. In the darkness, a spark of hope, a spark of fury, and the war for the soul of the planet was only just beginning. Night fell heavy over the broken world. The cities lay silent, hollow shells of what they once were. The sky, still filled with the cold iron of Earth's warships, glowed faintly with the dim light of fires that never stopped burning. In the darkness of ruined streets, the people of this world, those who had survived the monsters, now lived in fear of the very beings they had called for help. The Deathworlders had brought safety from one nightmare, but they had replaced it with another, the cold steel of control, the shadow of Earth's iron fist, and deep in the ashes of this dying world, betrayal was born. In hidden tunnels beneath a shattered capital, alien hands passed weapons from one to another. Old guns, blades made from scrap metal, explosives pulled. From the wreckage of fallen buildings, it wasn't much, it wasn't enough. But it was all they had. And with every whispered oath, with every clenched fist, the resistance grew. They knew the cost. They had seen what the Deathworlders did to those who disobeyed. They had watched entire neighborhoods reduced to dust in seconds. But still, the will to fight burned inside them. The belief that life under Earth's boot was not life at all. And so, in the deepest shadows, the decision was made. They would strike, even if it meant death. Above them, in the fortified walls of the human command post, Commander Vance stood unmoving, hands folded behind his back, eyes locked on the glowing map of the planet below. His face was carved from stone, his voice quiet. But sharp reports. An officer stepped forward, her voice tight. "Sabotage cells detected in zones 4 and 7, sir. 2 patrols lost. Supply lines disrupted." Vance didn't blink. Response full force authorized. Containment underway. He nodded once, cold, calculated. He didn't see people in the reports. He saw problems. Numbers variables, too. Be controlled. Be erased. But something deeper was happening now. Something even Vance could not fully see. The alien resistance wasn't the only threat growing in the shadows. Within the human ranks themselves, cracks were beginning to form. In a smaller operations room aboard one of the orbiting carriers, human pilot Lieutenant Clark sat alone, her hands trembling slightly as she watched a live feed of the latest crackdown. She saw the black-armored soldiers dragging terrified alien civilians from their homes. She saw fire in the streets. She saw children screaming. Something inside her broke. She thought of the mission, the orders, the words they had all been, trained to obey without question. But the faces, the fear. She couldn't push it away. Her crewmate entered quietly, seeing her pale face, her distant eyes. "Clark," he said softly. "You good?" She shook her head. "No," she whispered. "We're not the good guys." The words tasted like poison, and once spoken, they could not be taken back. Elsewhere on the ground, the alien resistance moved. Their first major act was already in motion, a direct strike on one of Earth's newly established fuel depots. The target was chosen carefully, far enough from civilian zones to avoid mass slaughter, but close enough to deliver a message. The message was simple: we will not bow. We will not die silent. The operation began at dawn. A team of alien saboteurs, faces hidden beneath worn helmets, crept through the ruins toward the human supply line. The night was cold. The only sound was the soft hum of distant drones overhead. Every footstep felt like a death sentence, like every breath could be their last. But still, they moved. Above them, the Deathworlders remained unaware at first. But Earth's machines never slept. The first tripwire caught the lead saboteur. A silent flash. A metal claw snapping shut. Scream cut short. And then the sky lit up as hidden human defense systems activated, flooding the ruins with blinding light. Sirens screamed. Auto turrets swiveled. Trap was sprung. The surviving aliens ran, scattering into the dark as the first shots rang out. Human soldiers, swift and silent, moved in with terrifying speed. The ground shook as explosions ripped through the streets. In minutes, the sabotage cell was gonna either dead, captured, or fleeing in terror. Blood stained the rubble. Smoke choked the air. But one of the saboteurs survived, wounded. Bleeding, she crawled through the shattered ruins until the world became a blur. But she carried something with her data, images of Earth's plans. Proof of something worse than occupation. The humans were preparing permanent colonization, terraforming. Resource extraction on a planetary scale. They weren't just staying for a while, they were never leaving by the time the survivor was pulled to safety deep within the resistance tunnels. Her breath was shallow, her skin gray. She pressed the stolen data into trembling hands. "Tell them," she whispered. "Tell them what's coming." And then she was gone. Back in the high command, Vance received word of the failed attack. His expression never changed. He gave no speeches, no anger, just orders, double patrols, implement biometric scans, authorize lethal force in all unsecured zones. But even as the humans tightened their grip, the damage was done. The seed of rebellion had been planted. And worse, inside the human fleet itself, the first cracks of disobedience had begun to spread. More soldiers whispered doubts, or pilots questioned their orders. Small things, tiny rebellions of the heart. But Vance knew. It was always the small cracks that brought the tallest towers crashing down. Night fell again, in the ruins. The aliens buried their dead. They lit fires for the first time in weeks, not for warmth, but for memory. In the human outposts, the Deathworlders sharpened their weapons, their cold eyes watching every shadow. The air itself felt heavy, tense, as if the entire planet was holding its breath. Something was coming. Something worse than monsters. Something worse than war. Betrayal, and when it came. No one human or alien would escape unchanged. The sky burned black, from horizon to horizon. The world was a flame smoke, rising in thick curtains, choking the air, blotting out the sun. The Iron Fleet still hung above like silent giants, unmoving, watching. But below, on the ruined ground, the planet itself was tearing apart. Explosions lit the night. The sound of gunfire never stopped. The time for whispers was over. The uprising had ignited into full rebellion. And both sides knew there would be no going back. In the shattered streets of the capital, alien fighters, once farmers, builders, teachers now carried scavenged weapons in trembling hands. They moved through rubble like ghosts, faces smudged with dirt, eyes full of defiance. Inside them, children ran messages between burning buildings. Elders carried the wounded. No one was safe. No one stood aside. The war had consumed them all. The Deathworlders responded with cold, ruthless force. Earth's black-armored soldiers swept through the ruins, weapons blazing. Drones screamed overhead. Steel walkers crushed through streets that had once been alive with color and music. But now there was only ash, only silence broken by the thunder of war. The humans didn't hesitate. They didn't flinch. It was calculated, every bullet precise. They called it pacification. But the rebels called it something else. Genocide. In the command center aboard the Titan's Fist. Commander Vance stood motionless, his cold eyes locked on the glowing red battlefield map. Reports flooded in attacks in every sector, fuel depots, burning, human casualties mounting. His officers moved with sharp precision, relaying orders without emotion. But deep beneath their perfect discipline, cracks were spreading. Doubt, fear, and somewhere inside Vance's own heart a place buried too. Deep for most to seize, something shifted. "Deploy orbital strikes," he said softly. The words sent shivers through the room. His officers hesitated. "Sir," one of them said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Civilians do it," Vance repeated, his eyes like ice. The order went through. And above the burning world, the Iron Fleet stirred. The first orbital. Beams lanced down from the black ships, carving the surface with surgical devastation. Whole blocks vanished in white-hot fire. The ground split. The air howled. It was a message, resist, and be erased. But on the ground, something extraordinary happened. The rebels did not break. They fought harder, fiercer. They moved like shadows, appearing and vanishing, striking and running, always one step ahead. And in the heart of the ruined capital, word spread. Help was coming, from the sky, from inside the enemy. Lieutenant Clark had made her choice, guided by guilt, driven by a spark of humanity she could no longer ignore. She left her post. With stolen access codes and trembling hands, she piloted a small dropship down through the chaos, avoiding the eyes of her own fleet. She carried supplies, medical kits, ammunition, food, but more than that, she carried the knowledge of how Earth's machines worked, how to blind them, how to slow them, how to give the dying rebels a chance. Her dropship slammed down near the heart of the rebellion. Alien, eyes wide, shocked, terrified, watched as she stepped out, hands raised. Helmet off, a human face, a human voice. "I'm not your enemy," she said, her voice shaking. "Let me help." At first, weapons were raised, fingers on triggers, shouts of anger. But then one of the alien elders, his face gaunt, his eyes tired, stepped forward and said softly, "Then help us stand." And so they stood together for the first time. The final battle erupted before dawn. The humans, armed with every weapon Earth could bring, poured into the ruins in endless waves. The rebels, outgunned, outnumbered, exhausted, dug in deep. Now dressed in scavenged armor, fought beside them, feeding them intel, calling out weak spots in the human lines. She fired on her own kind. She bled alongside the people she had once been ordered to control. The streets ran red, the air shook with fire. But block by block, the rebels held. In the command deck, Vance's cold mask began to crack. "Why aren't they breaking?" he muttered, almost to himself. "Why do they keep fighting?" No one had an answer. Because Earth had never faced this before, not from weak species, not from broken worlds. It expected fear, submission. But what they faced instead was something far older, far stronger, the will to be free. As the battle raged, the Iron Fleet above prepared for final measures. Word came down: if the surface could not be controlled, the planet would be purged. Clark received the message through her stolen comm. She felt her heart freeze. A full planetary cleansing. Survivors. She ran through smoke and flame, searching for the resistance leaders, screaming the warning. "They're going to burn the entire planet. We have to stop this now." The rebels, faces pale with horror, knew what had to be done. There was no victory waiting for them. Only one choice remained: take the fight to the skies or die beneath them. And so, with Clark's codes, with stolen human shuttles, a handful of rebels launched upward into the fire-lit heavens. Toward the Iron Fleet itself. It was madness. It was suicide. But it was the only chance left. The final clash. It's unfolded in orbit. Alien fighters and stolen craft slammed into Earth's black warships. Explosions bloomed in the dark. Clark herself piloted one of the battered ships, her hands steady, her voice calm. She knew she would not survive, but it didn't matter anymore. Only the mission mattered. The rebels breached one of the command ships, hand-to-hand combat in zero gravity. Gunfire in metal corridors, the very air screamed, and finally inside, the heart of the flagship, the message was sent, a broadcast open frequency, a single voice, Clark's voice. "Earth doesn't own this world. Earth doesn't own any world. We're more than what you made us. We are not your machines." The broadcast echoed across the stars, and somewhere deep inside the cold heart of Commander Vance, something cracked. He gave the order to halt the purge. The weapons fell silent. The Iron Fleet stopped. On the ground, the rebels, bloodied, broken, but alive, looked to the sky and saw, for the first time, peace. The Deathworlders had not won. The monsters had not won. The people had. The last stand was over, and a new dawn was coming. The dawn broke red. A blood-colored sky stretched over the broken cities, casting the ruins in an eerie burning light. Smoke still curled from shattered buildings. Human patrols moved through the debris like black shadows, their boots crunching over glass and twisted metal, but something had changed in the air. Something sharp. Something dangerous. It was not just fear anymore. It was defiance. The uprising had begun. It started not with an explosion or a scream, but with a whisper. A single coded message passed through hidden hands in the underground tunnels. Words spoken in darkness, soft but unstoppable. Now, the resistance, small, broken, outnumbered, had finally chosen to strike. The aliens who once cowered in silence had nothing left to lose. Their world was already gone, their future stolen, and they knew with cold certainty that they would die either in chains or on their feet. The first target was a human communication hub one. Of the steel towers that reached into the smoky sky, relaying orders from the Iron Fleet above to every soldier below, the humans had thought it untouchable. The Deathworlders had built their walls strong, their defenses sharp, but even steel can crack when the right hand strikes. A team of alien saboteurs moved through the ruins. Under the cover of thick morning fog, they carried homemade explosives, crude, unstable, but deadly enough. Each step felt like the last. Each breath tasted like ash. But still they moved. The first blast came at sunrise. Towering explosions split the sky as the Cums Tower folded in on itself. Steel beams twisting, cables snapping, sparks raining down like deadly rain. The shockwave flattened nearby structures. Fire rolled across the ground. And for the first time since the humans had landed, the black-armored soldiers faltered. The Deathworlders reacted fast, faster than any other species would have. Orders flew through emergency channels. Troop carriers roared to life. Drones screamed across the sky. But even as the humans moved to crush the saboteurs, new attacks ignited across the planet. Supply depots, fuel stations, armored convoys, each one struck with careful precision. Each one burning. The alien resistance had been weak. Scattered, hopeless. But no longer. In the main human command bunker, alarms blared. Screens flashed red. Commander Vance stood at the center of chaos, his cold eyes locked on the growing list of damaged sectors. For the first time, his stone face tightened. He spoke in a low, sharp voice. "Lock all zones. Full suppression." An officer hesitated. "Sir, some of the zones include civilians." Vance didn't blink. "I said all zones." The order went through. And across the planet, the Deathworlders responded with terrifying speed. Troops poured into the streets. Gunships prowled the skies. Checkpoints turned into fortified walls. Anyone caught outside the human-controlled areas was shot without warning. Fire and steel rained down. But it was already too late to stop what had started in one shattered district. A small group of alien fighters watched as human soldiers stormed the ruins, cutting down anything that moved. The oldest among them, scarred elder with tired eyes, clenched his fists and whispered, "We should have risen sooner." One of the younger fighters, barely more than a child, nodded. "We rise now." They moved in silence. They struck where they could. And for every loss, for every death, more joined the cause. Not just warrior civilians, families, survivors. Even the weak found ways to fight, setting traps, feeding information, hiding the wounded. The planet itself was turning against the invaders, but the humans were not idle. Vance unleashed new weapons machines not yet seen by the alien eyes. Giant armored walkers moved through the cities, their cannons lighting up the ruins with brutal force. Autonomous drones patrolled day and night, cold and merciless. And worst of all were the black-clad elite unit soldiers, enhanced with cybernetic implants. Their faces covered by masks that showed no sign of humanity at all. They moved with deadly precision. Hunting the resistance like wolves stalking prey, the death toll climbed, and still the rebellion burned. In the orbiting ships above, not every human remained silent. Lieutenant Clark, her hands trembling, watched. The footage stream across the screens, images of fire, of blood, of terrified faces. She knew the orders, she knew the mission. But she also knew something had gone horribly wrong. We were supposed to help them. She whispered to herself, her voice barely audible. Her crewmate, grim-faced, said nothing. That night, Clark made a choice. She opened a hidden channel, a forbidden frequency, and sent a simple message to the surface. Hidden in the noise of battle. I can help. I won't be part of this. It was a message meant for no one, but somehow, against all odds, it reached alien hands. And in the darkness, a single spark of trust flickered. The next morning, the war grew worse. The humans launched brutal retaliation strikes, flattening entire blocks where resistance fighters were believed to hide. Civilian zones were sealed tighter. Supplies were cut off. Hunger and fear spread. But even with death closing in from every side, the alien rebels refused to break. They remembered the first monsters, the creatures that had destroyed their cities. They remembered the terror. But now they faced something colder, something worse. They would not kneel. At the heart of it all, Commander Vance stood like a statue, untouched by the chaos he unleashed. His voice remained calm. His orders never wavered. To him, this was just another operation, another planet to control, another lesson to teach. But deep inside the fire and the ruins, something had changed. The uprising had begun, and even the coldest hand could not hold a burning world forever.